Yeah, so we haven't talked about this much on the podcast, but I do think it's worth discussing just because it is very most definitely in the zeitgeist right now, something that people are talking about. And because I am genuinely interested on your opinion on the merits of this latest story. But yeah, Saagar Enjeti of Rising had on again this morning. I think his name is Jeremy Corbell. He's like a big UFO dude. And they were talking about these latest alien sightings or latest information that's been revealed about these new spherical UFO crafts that have leaked. And I just thought it'll be interesting to talk about for a little bit.
For whatever reason, whenever I see Jeremy Corbell now, he'll always be immortalized in my brain as the guy that wouldn't shut the fuck up when Bob Lazar was on the Joe Rogan podcast.
Dude,
but anyway,
I know. But again, if you think this is all bullshit, that's totally fine. You're more than
we'll talk about it.
Yeah, but I just want to play this because it does give some insight into the nature of these flying objects and also why they're so interesting. Because again, if you just look at the footage and you don't really know much about it, you might just be like, okay, these could be weather balloons or just any kind of military craft. What is making these UFOs more interesting or more noteworthy than other unidentified aerial phenomenon? So I think it's a good insight.
Vehicle that can penetrate that barrier between air and sea or air and space without destruction, then we're looking at a propulsion system that is so far advanced, it's beyond next generation technology. So we're probably looking at, and what it is theorized is we're looking at, is a gravitational propulsion system, a non-reactionary propulsion system. Everything we know, you push something back and that's how you go forward. These craft, particularly things like the Tic Tac craft, they seem to be operating on a different set of rules than what we have, an advanced technology. And if that's the case, we need to know.
Yeah, and Jeremy, all of this is in the context of you and I are talking the night after 60 Minutes aired a special which has brought this topic in order to wide viewership, possibly in an audience which, is hearing some of it for the first time. Do you think that this is going to spur some renewed calls in order to release some of the information, some of the unclassified information specifically that you've been referring to, you've been reporting on so much more over the last several months? And what else can we expect? Not necessarily from you, although I'd love to hear a hint of that as well, but what else can we expect of what we know that the Pentagon has but have been unable to see?
Well, you can't put this back in the bottle now. And I think that's so important. As I like to say, people's curiosities have been weaponized. They're asking for answers at this point. They're no longer going to be passive consumers and observers. They're demanding answers. And that's what we're seeing with the Senate Intelligence Committee, asking our intelligence agencies to provide the American public and global public the truth about UFOs. And if that truth is we don't know where they're from, we don't know who operate them, and we don't know their intent, then we have a duty to find that out. So what can we expect? Well, as you can see, there's been a sea change. From me, I'm going to help push that ball forward. Absolutely. There's more footage. Mm-hmm. What you can expect from the global public is people are now asking the right questions. And that's the first step that we have to getting towards the truth.
That's exactly right. Thank you so much for all the work that you do on this.
I think if you and Saagar were ever going to get together and bond, he wouldn't want to smoke pot with you, so you'd have to drink beers and talk about UFOs. You'd have to get a little deep before the topic of the Electoral College comes up or something like.
Oh yeah, before we start battling. Yeah, no, exactly. And honestly, if we ever did have Saagar on the podcast, I would probably just like to talk to him about aliens. To be completely honest, but just because we don't have a lot of the same, political beliefs. To be
unless we had him on to spar, that would be.
Unless we had him on to
his chops. Yeah, I would love to debate Saagar because here's the thing. One thing I'll say about Saagar before we actually talk about the UFO story, because we've dunked on Saagar a lot on this show. He actually believes what the fuck he's saying, which is more than you can say, I think, for a lot of Republican talking hosts. And
not only does he believe what he's saying, but it actually is coming from a coherent political philosophy. He's not just a reactionary.
Yeah.
And that is coming from someone that has intense and serious disagreements with
about a lot of shit,
legitimate disagreement, unovercomable disagreement. So I'll just say that, but that's another discussion for another day. We've done videos on it. The cannabis being one of the most egregious for sure. But I do think it's interesting with these stories, and I just can't decide where I really come down on this because on one hand, they could just be another military's craft like China or Russia or something, but that would be a war crime to be flying these motherfuckers around, U.S. nuclear bases, around U.S. airships, stuff like that. So, if it is another country, then one, they're, putting us to fucking shame. They're embarrassing the fuck out of America because they have technology that we don't, despite us having, the world's largest military budget times literally like 100. So if another country has better military technology than us, that's automatically a huge embarrassment to America. And also, if they're flying these motherfuckers around, blocking radars and going in restricted airspace, then that literally is a war crime. And I mean, unless this other country has really advanced technology, I can't imagine any other world superpower really, truly wanting to pick a fight with us, right? We're so ready to start a war literally at the drop of a fucking pin. So I just can't imagine that like Russia or China would think it would be a good idea to bait a country into war that so clearly is ready and willing to go to war. So that automatically is kind of like I just can't buy the explanation that it's another country. The other, and then the second explanation is, well, they are American aircrafts. They literally are American military equipment. We just don't want to let anyone know that this technology exists and that we have it. But then it's like, why are they even acknowledging it at all? Why are they, leaking this to the New York Times and the Washington Post? And why are these stories on 60 Minutes, for example, airing? What's with this? Why are we all of a sudden now getting this drum up of public information? To me, if this is leading to something, it seems like it's leading to something that's going to drop somewhat quickly, somewhat in the near future. I honestly would not be surprised if in the next year or so we get some information that, if not confirms some crazy shit, really gives some credence to certain theories that up until now have been considered total crackpot.
Yeah, I mean, that certainly is a possibility. However, I don't anticipate that. I actually come from this from a much more skeptical position. I think that you kind of nailed the hit the nail on the head with your second guess, which is what I'm really heavily leaning towards. I think it's a different department in the United States government. What I've seen and what I've read and everything I understand about the United States military is that it's very sectioned off, and it's designed so that even after time and time again of new presidents, new staffs, new cabinets coming through, there's that obviously the military industrial complex, that machine that keeps raging forward. I would imagine that what is truly the most cutting edge shit is happening in that stage of the United States government, somewhere that deep where everything is classified like 10 times over. And what you really have is a small field of probably 25 to 100 of the smartest, most ambitious individuals. You're getting the top motherfuckers that came out of Annapolis for their flight training and Navy SEAL. Those are the guys that are going to be the pilots. You're taking the guys that are so smart that they go to MIT when they're 12, that they don't have any friends. They don't, I'm imagining that it is going to be kind of like Manhattan Project kind of vibes, because when the United States had the magic and the lightning in a bottle that was the Manhattan Project, when they created the nuke, they did not stop doing that kind of thing. They did not stop manipulating scientists. When Oppenheimer spoke out against the bomb and said that he regretted it, they ruined his credibility and they savagely destroyed his entire career. That kind of apparatus has maintained its place throughout all of the Cold War and into now. And what I would imagine is happening is, I think some of it is probably okay, like a little bit got out and that's fine. They're not addressing it. Let's let the press speculate, right? I mean, there have been so many, I guess, like incidents right throughout history. Like obviously there's the most famous Roswell incident, but there's like others that have, been like sightings where we're like, oh, this is going to be the big thing. And then it just blows over. The cynic in me expects that maybe this is to kind of overshadow some of the, pitfalls of the Biden administration to keep us from considering
under Trump.
But it's continuing, right?
Yeah, but that's why I think it's weird, is that it's not just one administration kind of using.
But it's the deep state trying to cover up the foreign policy agenda of the future. I don't know. That's just what I would expect. I mean, I hope it's aliens.
I mean, you could say anything that's going on is just a distraction from other things that are going on. Like, I mean, that's true to an extent, but things also can happen that aren't a distraction. Not everything is an illusion necessarily.
No. But you asked why they would let it get out if it was the United States. I think probably a lot of it was a little bit of an accident. Like, I'm not saying they wanted a ton of it to get out, but I'm saying when it does get out, they're not panicked because they're like, oh, we're so insulated.
Well, according to these Pentagon officials and some of these like pilots, for example, that are doing coasts or like aerial exercises, for example, off the coast of San Diego or Virginia Beach, have said that like this has been going on for years and they've been seeing these unexplainable area phenomenon for years now. So if that's the case, that it's like some other, 25 people in the Pentagon that are like doing this under the shadow of everyone else, then they're doing it a lot. They're constantly doing it, and they're doing it without much regard for secrecy. They're doing it in front and out in the open of their other uninformed personnel. So there's just all these questions that to me don't quite add up. And don't get me wrong, I'm about as skeptical as it fucking gets. That being said, the U.S. military or the Pentagon does not need our permission to add to the military budget. They do it year after year, aliens or no aliens. They're going to keep doing it without our consent or with our consent. They don't give a fuck. They'll add $1 billion to the Pentagon budget, and they'll use Iran to justify that. They don't need aliens to justify it. They have tons of fake bullshit that they can manufacture at will. So it just strikes me as so odd, and maybe it's maybe it just is a distraction. Like I said, I'm as skeptical as it fucking gets. And as you say here, that, like I said, that is possible. That tactic is not exactly unpioneered. So that is definitely true. But I also just don't want to be the kind of person that refuses to, like I don't know. I just don't want to be the kind of person that.
No, I hear you. I hear what you're saying, because it is possible, right? Like, and I'm always been the kind of person typically that's like, of course aliens exist, right? It would be impossible. It would be almost impossible for them not to. That there's, especially when you have a broad interpretation of what alien is, any kind of extraterrestrial life outside of Earth. Of course, right. That with the universe ever expanding, all these kinds of things, it's impossible that we're the only, whether or not they're conscious, whether all those kinds of things remain to be understood. I just think that, Occam's razor, right? Like, is it more likely that another fucking species out of the universe has come and entered our Earths and not fucked with us and destroyed us? Because I just think that anything that human history tells us, and of course we're grasping at straws, assuming that any kind of conscious being that would be able to get to the Earth would have any kind of human.
If they get to the Earth, and they're a lot more advanced than humans.
That's true, but
infinitely more advanced.
But you could say that human beings now are infinitely more advanced than a caveman was 2,000 years ago, and yet the instinct was the same: to dominate, to take over, to reap what you've sowed, essentially, right? So if I'm a caveman, like, I'm going to conk you over the head and take what the fuck you have. 2,000, 3,000, 10,000 years later, that's still the human way. Conk you over the head and take what the fuck you have. Bomb Libya, take the oil.